When you think of musical improvisation, the first thing that comes to mind might be jazz or the blues. But the practice of improvisation is actually a part of many musical traditions all across the globe. As a classically trained musician, I've personally been working on developing my improvisational skills over the past few years, as you can see from these charts that detail how I spend my practice hours.
Hey, do it again.
Today, classical musicians are known for playing music as written in a score, note for note. But this wasn't always the case. This may surprise you, but from the Middle Ages to about the late 1800s or so, improvisation was actually a big part of music performance and training. So why have classical musicians stopped learning how to improvise? In classical music, improvisation dates back to the Middle Ages. Soloists would add spontaneous embellishments over familiar melodies, and the score provided served as a skeleton of the melody over which musicians would add their own variations. An example of melodic variation today might be found at a sporting event with the national anthem. Singers would typically add in variations and fills while keeping the melody and lyrics still recognizable. Going overboard with embellishments, however, is never ideal because it can easily lead to a distasteful interpretation. Classical musicians also improvise accompaniments to melodies. In fact, the first record of improvisation in Western music comes from 9th century writings that detail how to add counter melodies to Gregorian chants. Later, during the Baroque era, this type of improvised accompaniment became what is called basso continuo. They used a kind of music notation called figured bass, which provides a bass line along with symbols that indicate what intervals to use, chord suggestions, and types of voicings. So a musician, say a keyboardist, would take this information and would improvise with and over the bass line. Probably the most widely known example of improvisation in classical music is the cadenza. If you're playing a Mozart concerto back in the day, towards the end, there's always a point where the harmony reaches a peak, and then everyone stops. The pianist or whatever instrumentalist will do a solo, basically, on the themes from the main parts. And traditionally, that was all improvised.
That's good. Yeah.
That was your theme. Maybe you would, so we're in G major. That's the orchestra. The conductor goes, okay.
Okay, question. Is this improvised right here?
Yeah, you just
okay.
do right? And then you go, maybe you'll try to make it more
That's
fancy.
super well improvised.
I don't know. Maybe you do. No, I don't like that.
All right, every time you play something really cool, you just be like, I don't know.
No.
It'd be killing.
No. A few soloists carry on the tradition of improvising their own cadenzas, including pianists Gabriela Montero and Robert Levin. Levin tells us, something spontaneous sounds different from something that is not, and the audience benefits from that in a performance. Whenever I've played improvised cadenzas, the audience gets very quiet. For the first time in most of their lives, they're at a classical concert where they don't know what's going to happen next. I feel like as a classical musician, I should be able to say, yeah, I can improvise a cadenza.
You say it's a lost art because they used to do it all the time.
They used to, but then now people just play cadenzas that are already written out.
I got the theme, y'all.
Okay.
Barney theme song.
Oh, jeez.
The Barney theme song.
No.
Twinkle,
I
twinkle.
love you.
Oh, mine.
And then the orchestra might go. Blah 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 blah.
Why do you think improvisation disappeared from classical when like they was the nicest at it in the beginning?
Maybe this is partially the reason why.
Improvisation.
Because all of these composers wrote their own versions of cadenzas. They would write it out. And I think back in the day, it was to facilitate and help performers that were just lesser improvisers.
So guide them through. This is what you
they
should do.
wanted, they wanted the cadenza to be good. So they wrote one out or several out. And then because they exist, performers would just latch onto that and just learn that. Also during the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution created the middle class, and now more people with disposable income were interested in music performance and education. Rather than hiring professional musicians, middle-class households can now purchase their own instruments and perform themselves. Also, the growth of published sheet music gave more people access to classical music. The priorities of a lot of classical music performances, recordings, concerts, I think it relies on a certain kind of rigid exactness.
Yeah, that's intimidating.
And I think it wasn't always like that. When you're playing a piece of Baroque music, even the trills, which are meant to be very spontaneous, everyone plays it like that, so everyone will then. But whereas back in the day, I feel like they would maybe or. The 20th century also brought about breakthroughs in recording technology. Now musical performances could be captured and replayed forever, and this new reality led to the pursuit of perfection, which inevitably involves less spontaneity and less risk-taking. Recordings of famous works by composers such as Mozart and Beethoven became canonized as museum music with less demand for improvised performances. Or as Professor Robin Moore puts it, spontaneous innovations cannot occur in music which is intended to be more a replication from 1790 than a musical event of today. Personally, I feel that improvisation has been making a sort of comeback into the classical music world thanks to many modern composers, and this has certainly been influencing me, as well as looking towards other genres like jazz, flamenco, and folk music that still embrace many forms of improvisation. I think improvisation is a very valuable practice, very relevant to music making, to listening, and to experience music in a very spontaneous and creative way. For me, it's been very fulfilling to learn how to improvise in these different styles, try improvising with a band, do improvisation experiments with irregular pulses and things like that. So I really do hope to see more of an emphasis put on improvisation as a practice in both formal and informal music education moving forward. If I were to give myself advice, I would say, before you do anything else, find friends to explore this with, and friends that can help guide you and jam with you. Because I spent so much time just
on my own at the piano, trying to understand certain concepts about jamming in general. But as soon as I started to play with other people, our jam with Adam being one of them, it opened up a different perspective, a different kind of understanding about all of this.
I have my formula of improvisation. There is inspiration, there's imitation, and then there's recreation, okay? The inspiration is what we're inspired by. It's the template. It's what catches our attention. It's what gives us that creative feeling. So my second step is imitation, learning exactly what that template is, learning how to play that template backwards, forward, learning it like the back of your hand, okay? This is where the skill portion comes in. The recreation, the most important step, recreating, adding your flavor to it. But that's like the formula that I use for improvisation all the time.
Thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like to see more videos, don't forget to subscribe.